here and have joined us today to hear from the marvelous Maria. She's going to talk all about supporting access to delete or supporting the access and delete requests that could be coming in pretty shortly to you all. Because I think we all see the headlines of, Sephora getting sued, Facebook being in trouble. So privacy is definitely in the headlines anymore. And with Maria, all of us will be able to rest assured and sleep well at night because we'll be prepared. So I think that's the name of the game, of being prepared. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to you, Maria, to take it away.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you to the hosts today, to Sarah, Gretchen, and Luke for inviting me to be with this user group today. I'm really grateful. And well, my name is Maria. I'm a principal product marketing manager at Adobe. And actually, I've been working in the area of data privacy for years now since I joined Adobe, and I was around when GDPR came into effect in 2018, and it's been 5 years already. However, it seems like we're in 2018 all over again because there is a new wave of data enforcement that is coming from the regulators or the enforcers that we call like data protection agencies. So that's why we're starting to hear a lot about privacy, GDPR. Many customers want to connect with us and get our perspective. For today's session, I'm going to focus on what tools Adobe Analytics has to offer to help you with your privacy readiness and supporting the GDPR requests or CCPA requests that are coming from consumers. So to get us started, I wanted to cover what are different market forces that are driving how we use behavioral data and how we collect data. First, there's a shift to durable identifiers driven by the deprecation of third-party cookies. And also, consumers are expecting to have personalized experiences that are relevant for them and they are consistent across the journey. And this is a balancing act that brands need to navigate because they need data to offer personalized experience, and at the same time they need to comply with privacy regulation and apply strong data governance practices so they can offer that privacy and security to their consumers. And finally, there's a consolidation on market platforms because everyone wants to like streamline how to use their data and how to activate that data. Now, I'll just give a high level overview of what are different effects of privacy regulations and what's happening in the industry or in this space. So, because of the new privacy regulations, uh, the vendors are coming up with privacy-centric technologies. For example, for years, um, Apple and other technology vendors deprecated third-party cookies, but now Chrome is deprecating third-party cookies that will have an effect. Then there's also Apple ITP, which limits the lifespan of cookies to 7 days. And then there is something that is coming up, such as cookieless analytics. And that's on the technology side of things. On the consumer side, now brands need to ask for consent to collect data. That means it decreases the amount of data or the volume of data that is collected. And also, consumers are expecting for their data to be deleted when they ask for the data to be deleted. There's also the risk of not compliance with privacy regulations, and there's last year there was a lot of questions about the transfer of data between the US and the EU. Now, I want to quickly review what are the new rights or the different four main areas of focus of the privacy regulations. First, the new privacy regulations, they expand the definition of what's considered personal data. Under, for example, GDPR, IP addresses, and cookies are considered personal data. Second, there is consent requirements. In order to collect the data, we need to ask for consent, and it's going to be different in Europe than in other parts of the world. For example, like in Europe, the default is that if you don't have consent, you cannot track. Third, there are new rights that we need to prepare and support for the consumer, that are the right to access their data, correct their data, and delete it. And also, there could be potentially massive penalties if a brand is found to be not compliant with privacy regulations. Like for GDPR, is up to 4% of the annual revenue. So that's why data protection officers are on top of things when it comes to privacy and data collection. I wanted to walk you really quick on what would be a typical experience for offering consent to the data subject that we are going to be called, like the consumer is called data subject within GDPR. So the consumer she's called Laura, she's going to come to the website. She's going to interact with a consent banner that, in this case, the airline implemented. And in this case, the data controller is implementing that consent banner, deciding what's the language, what's the design, where in the website to implement the consent banner. And a lot of brands, they're asking Adobe, what is the best practice here? And this is a very typical question or like a very tricky question that's going to depend on the area or on the industry. And there are many variables that you can't adjust here. So as I said, the language that you're using, where in the website are you implementing that consent banner, and the design, like what colors are you using, what are like little nudges that you're implementing within the experience that will help the user navigate that. And something that I always tell customers is that they need to pay attention to that consent banner and make sure that they're using A/B testing, trying to optimize that experience, because that's gonna dramatically affect how much data is collecting, how much data they're collecting. In that relationship, Adobe and the brand, in this case, an airline, the brand is the controller of the data. That means that you decide what data to collect and what to do with the data. And Adobe acts as a processor of the data. We're helping the brand process the data, make sense of the data, leverage it. And together, we are gonna be offering privacy, security capabilities that will help support this privacy-ready journey that we're in. So we're gonna offer tools such as the ability to choose how long you want to keep the data. And then we have the privacy service API that I'm gonna talk in more detail later. But you're gonna have the ability to access and access and delete the data. Now, let me walk you quickly through what is the workflow of sending that data request. So in this case, Laura, she's our consumer or data subject. She's going to reach out to the brand, and we are going to have data privacy admin. The data privacy admin is going to receive the request from the data subject through a potential portal that you implemented. And then you're going to send that request to Adobe Experience Platform. Then once we receive the request, we honor that request across all of our solutions. And then we get back to the brand confirming that we deleted data or we acted on the request. And finally, the brand will get back to the data subject on confirming that the data was deleted. In this journey of data privacy readiness, I wanted to cover how is Adobe helping brands build trust and transparency through data governance. So as I said, in this GDPR context, we have brand, and the brand is a data controller, and we have Adobe. Adobe is a data processor. In that relationship, the data controller is the only owner of the data. So Adobe doesn't have any interest in that data or doesn't have any utility from data itself. So it is only the brand or the data controller that decides what data to collect, how to use the data, the purpose of that data. And this relationship in that way and giving that full ownership to the brand, it's a lot of, it's very relevant and at the same time it's very powerful, because that means that you decide like what to do with the data, and that you can offer full transparency to your consumer to tell them, I'm using the data for this purpose. And that full transparency is very valuable these days by consumers, and that's their expectations for engaging in digital experiences today. And I was saying, like, Adobe is in a very unique position because we our technology first is very transparent, and we as like other vendors don't have any interest in the data itself. So that's a unique differentiator for Adobe. Again, we have all the technology and ways, methods to help brands comply with privacy regulations and the law. And just as a interesting fact, that 30% of our Adobe Analytics and Customer Journey Analytics are customer journey analytics customers are based in EMEA. Now, I wanted to touch a little bit in more detail. What are the tools available today to help our customers scale their data governance practices and honor those GDPR requests across their business and channels? So the most relevant one is the privacy service. So privacy service is a UI or an API. So we have both options that will help you manage privacy requests coming from the data from consumers. So using the privacy service will help reduce the manual effort to fulfill those consumer privacy requests. Second, we have data governance. So in Adobe Analytics, what we call data governance is the ability to use labels for your data. And we have 3 different kind of labels: identity sensitive labels and privacy labels. And the third element that we have to help brands comply with their data governance practices is the data retention. So we have defined by our contracts that the data retention period is 25 months. That means that at any point in time, you're going to have 25 months of data on a rolling basis. So that means, like, as the data starts growing old, then the data is deleted. And something to call out here is that some customers have 25 months, some customers have 37 months, or a different data retention period according to their contracts. So the call out here is to make sure that you like this is intentional for what you want to do, because for GDPR, data minimization is a principle. So just have as much data as you need for the purpose of your business. Also, I wanted to cover what are methods to delete data in Adobe Analytics. The first one, and this one is intended for when brands want to delete data at scale, or when they send data to Adobe Analytics by accident. So this is called the Data Repair API. So Data Repair API is used for those use cases when data is sent by accident, or when you want to delete data at scale. Then we have the privacy service, that is the one I covered in the previous slide. The privacy service API is only intended for when you have data requests coming from data subjects or consumers. You cannot use the privacy service API to delete data at scale. This is a reminder. And also, if you have like a very specific job that you want to do, we also offer engineering services to work on data corrections or data deletions that are that need a lot of custom work. However, like this engagements sometimes could take time, and also they cost for specialized services. Now, I wanted to cover a little bit more detail about the data governance labels that we have. So, as I said, we have three different kinds of labels. The identity data labels, they are used to identify individuals. The sensitive data labels, they are used to classify sensitive data, such as potentially like geolocation data. And finally, we have the privacy labels. The privacy labels are very important when it comes to privacy regulations, because they're going to be the labels that define which data will be accessed or deleted when Adobe Analytics receives a privacy request. So a request to delete data or to access data. So this is going to tell Adobe Analytics, this field of data needs to be deleted. And this different labels, each of these privacy labels can be applied to like the same data fields. And this is a different view that shows that you can edit the privacy labels that you apply to your data. Now I'm gonna go into the title of the presentation, which are the 7 steps to be ready to send those privacy requests. So the first step is really to become familiar with that documentation about that privacy service. So we have a lot of pages in Experience League that walk through the steps and all the details that you need to be aware to use that privacy service API or the privacy service UI. So make sure that you become familiar with that documentation. Second step is to make sure that your data retention period is aligned with your internal data retention policy. So that means work with your legal team, your privacy team, and tell them, I'm collecting X amounts of months of data in Adobe Analytics. Is that, are you okay with that? Does that align with our internal data governance practices? Because it's important that you partner with your privacy and your legal team to be successful. The third step is to become familiar with the privacy labels and the Adobe Analytics IDs that you have in your data. So the privacy labels are the ones I talked before, like the personal identifiable labels, the sensitive labels, and also the privacy labels that you can apply. The this is a fourth step. You need to do an analysis and an assessment of your Adobe Analytics implementation to understand what type of data you're collecting, and if your legal team would consider that subject to privacy regulations. To be honest, like, I talk to many customers about their privacy regulations, practices, their data governance practices, and some customers, depending on their implementation, they could decide, oh, this fields of data don't apply to GDPR, or because they could even consider like this data that I collect in Adobe Analytics is not subject to GDPR because of the methods and the ways that they're managing their data. And some other customers, they could be very on the other end. So it is a work that needs to be very specific to your organization. So you need to understand what data are you collecting with Adobe Analytics. Also, Adobe Analytics is a highly customizable tool. So by default, we're going to be collecting some data, but you in your implementation could be collecting other fields of data that are not collected by default in Adobe Analytics. So that's why that assessment step is very important. The next step is that once you identify which are the fields of data that are subject to privacy regulations, make sure that you label the data in through the privacy service console. Make sure that you label your data so we know what fields of data we need to delete when we get those privacy requests. The next thing to consider is that when you're sending those requests to Adobe Analytics, you need to match, or you need to send an ID so we know how to find that data within our systems or our data storage, and we can delete that data. And then once you've sent that job, you've sent the IDs of customers that their data needs to be deleted, you can go and see the status of that job through various methods, either through the privacy UI or the API. Okay, so now let me walk you through what are the takeaways of this session. First is that privacy regulations are only going to become more relevant over time. We are in a new world where more areas, more jurisdictions are going to be governed by privacy regulations. And also consumers' expectations are on the rise. Like consumers want their data to be safe. They want to be asked for consent. So we just need to adapt to this new world and navigate the world where we have privacy regulations and also consumers have more rights when it comes to their data privacy. Second takeaway is make sure that you align with your privacy team, your legal team, because they are the ones that can give you the guidance that you need to make sure that you are compliant with GDPR. So, again, Adobe Analytics is a very flexible technology, and our data collection is extremely flexible. So it is only your legal team that can give you that advice, and they need to know what data you're collecting and what's the purpose of that data. And here, it's not also important to align with your privacy, your legal teams, but also your instrumentation team or your reporting team, right? So everyone is aligned when it comes to your data collection and the objective that you have for your data. Then the next thing is make sure that you determine what is the workflow that you have internally in your organization to honor those privacy requests. So who within your organization is going to be receiving those privacy requests, and it's going to be like the point of contact to be sending those requests to Adobe. And finally, Adobe is very well positioned to help you with your privacy readiness. We are always working on privacy-centric technologies. And not only that, but also we are constantly aware of all the changes that are happening and thinking ahead of the game when it comes to data collection and privacy. So that's what I had to share today. There is another talk track, let's say, or another presentation that is really more to data collection. The customers are also very keen on knowing more about that topic. And I told Sarah and the team that I'm happy to come back some other time to talk about that one. But that's the one I had to share today. I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
No, this is all really great. Yeah, Gretchen.
Oh, I was just going to say that was a great presentation, Marie. A lot of good information. And it looks like we've got our first question here from Shane. Are you seeing US-based Adobe clients and customers deleting Adobe ECID, internal company IDs, etc., and delete requests?
So I think that's a question that will be up to your legal team to determine. But I think like in terms of that ECID, the ECID has like a similar purpose as a cookie for our Adobe technologies. Therefore, like from my own understanding, and I'm not a legal advisor or anything, that's something that I forgot to say like at the beginning of the presentation. I'm not a legal advisor by any means. I'm just like, but according to my understanding and what I hear from different perspectives, I would consider that ECID to be like personal data under GDPR.
And under CCPA?
Yeah, I think CCPA is very similar.
Okay.
In that sense.
Oh, I love it. I think with some of the reading I've been doing, Maria, so with the deletion requests, like if you're like Shane or Gretchen, like people out here, I know I'm going to pick on you. You guys run reports and you will report out a number, like number of visits, number of visitors, number of orders. And so when a deletion request comes in, how are we seeing that maybe impact reports and information that has been shared out? Like with Gretchen and Luke and Shane, would they see, I'm looping you in now too, Luke, would they see like a dip in some of the data, or is there like a way of sometimes like maybe the data is not, some of the data maybe is still there, it's just not tied to like a visitor, it's not tied to a person, like maybe the order still exists, but it doesn't say who it's tied to. Does that make sense? And how it could, I guess I'm kind of asking like how will it impact reporting on these deletions?
I mean, I assume my numbers go down, right? Once the deleted data is deleted.
Yeah, I definitely see like there will be an impact in the reporting.
Yeah.
I would say like most of the impact when it comes to reporting, I think, and I'm sure is going to come from the consent banners and the opt-out of the data collection, right? So that's another topic that customers have a lot of questions about, because now they're saying, after they implement the consent banner, and I'm seeing a lot of companies only now implementing consent banners, and they're saying like, oh, now I'm going to implement the consent banner, I see like a huge drop in my traffic. What do I do? So that's another area of conversation.
I mean, we know we're not catching everybody in our numbers, and we also know that numbers are only decreasing, but as far as certainly directionally, we should still be good and trending.
Yeah, and what I tell customers, like even if you're not collecting 100% of your data, the data that you're collecting is still valuable because you see conversions from like the portion of traffic that you're collecting. So what you could do is like if you have your opt-in, your opt-out rate, you could use a calculate metric to like a multiplier to try to estimate how many visitors you are actually having.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. There's a question there. As far as GDPR compliance, if an organization doesn't have presence in Europe and visitors are accessing US sites via VPN, then is a US-based company required to disclose cookie usage per GDPR versus CCPA? So it seems like this company doesn't have any European visitors, right? So yeah, so if you don't anticipate European visitors, like I don't know, again, this is not legal advice, but I wouldn't worry much about them because I think regulators are gonna like consider that, right? They know like which. I think what they do, honestly, they look at like, oh, which are the websites that have like the largest traffic in Europe? Let's go and audit them. So literally, that's what I see they're doing. They go after the larger website, the largest traffic, and I like that's how they're trying to drive enforcement is through fear.
That's too funny.
Yeah.
No, and I think an important thing here, like especially on what you're talking about, like if people say, "Hey, I want to know," so like the access, like what information do you have about me, and then like potentially delete. It's going to be hard to say, "Hey, how do I know who?" Like if Luke were to do that, I'd be like, "I don't know who Luke is because I haven't captured his name or anything like that in my analytics data." But I think what you guys have suggested. One of the steps here is that intake form. You'll have an intake form on your website. And so at that point, not only is like Luke, I'm using his example, like Luke putting in the request, but at that same point, that's where we would have to be capturing like the ECID or whatever when we're doing our like labeling. I think we call it dual, DULE.
Yeah.
And that labeling, when we pick what's our identifier, we pick like that ECID because that's what we'll use. Like, oh, yes, Luke provided some of this information, but Luke's not going to know his ECID or whatever we're using to identify him in the Adobe Analytics data. So I think that's a really slick way to capture it is using like that form and making sure your analytics are picking it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably having instructions for customers to install debugger and this ECID will not
How
work
to
very
read your analytics call and tell us your data. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
well.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's really cool. There's lots of questions popping up, so I won't ask the next one. I'll let you guys look like Julie had to follow on.
Okay, Julie's asking, isn't there a clause in CCPRA that states organizations can retain data if there is a business justification, as long as the individual isn't identified? Yes, I think like that's the general spirit of GDPR too. I think like I always remind people like, these regulations are not saying like don't collect anything or don't measure anything. I think like if you have like a business purpose for that data, then that's allowed. But that means that you have new responsibilities when it comes to the data collection. So that's how I think about things.
Yeah, and then Shane's kind of piggybacking off what I was saying on having that screen where you could collect it to pick up the ECID or the identifier. And he's spot on. Like that ECID is going to be device specific if you did it on your phone versus your laptop versus your tablet. So yeah.
But our data is only as good as our. That's why I tell people a user is not a person, right? Device browser combination.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of matching happens in the background, Maria, but to like Shane's point, like if I did, like, use one device to put in the request, what kind of matching happens in the background where it says, oh, this ECID, maybe I logged in once with it, and with that login, I was on a different ECID. I was like on my laptop. Is there that connection there where we put this ECID and we look across? Does it, has that logic in place to look across, find maybe a more durable identifier, and then continue on deleting that way, kind of trying to track me through?
So I think if you've done that stitching somehow within your solutions, because for example, like with cross-device analytics, you can do that, right? You can potentially stitch that cookie, like that ECID that is like unidentified to authenticated traffic. So in that case, yes, that data will also get deleted.
Awesome. And so Shane is thanks for having another follow-up. So he's like saying, in order to preserve aggregated reporting, can Adobe store such historical or aggregated data somehow?
I'm not sure about, I don't think I understand that question.
Aggregated. So Shane, are you trying to say like, talking about orders, like there were 20 orders last week, but then Luke puts in his request to delete his data, and he had an order. Now it would look like maybe 19 orders versus 20 orders. Is that kind of maybe what Shane is going after? Is like, do we have some historical where it's not tied to Luke, so we don't want to get in, prison privacy orange swimsuits, but still want to kind of maintain some of the data. I don't know, maybe integrity. I don't know if that's quite the right word.
I see. Okay. So I think it's going to depend based on the instructions that you gave through the labeling of the data, right? Because when you have to go and label your data, and one of the privacy labels is called, like, I think privacy labels. One of the data governance labels under DUL is called privacy labels, and that means that certain fields of data are going to be deleted when you receive a privacy request. So I think at the end of the day, like, with the data that needs to be deleted is the ones that are related to like personal data.
So that order would still exist. It'll just be in like an orphan order. It wouldn't be assigned to anyone in particular.
Yeah. Which makes sense. Like that data is not identifiable. The piece that has been identifiable has been like obfuscated or turned into something that no one could ever tie back to Luke. And so then you still have some integrity in the reporting, yet honoring Luke's request. Right. And I think that's what Julie, you're saying, to delete. Not that we would delete Luke because we love Luke, but delete his information, but retain, that you did assign that, some of the KPIs there, like order in the instance for our example. Yep, I'm with you. Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome.
And Maria, how does the whole cookieless analytics play into the privacy?
Yeah, that's a really good question that actually I enjoy talking about cookieless analytics, because I feel like it's a philosophical question, right? In order to track, you need some sort of persistence, like from click to click, right? That makes the journey. If you don't have any persistence, like let's not call it cookie, but let's call it like any mechanism. If you don't have any mechanism to track from click to click, then there's no journey that you can track. You could track potentially total number of clicks that you get on that specific part of your website. You could track which product has more clicks than other product, right? But I wouldn't call it analytics, right? I wouldn't call it analytics. And what I hear other vendors call cookieless analytics is that they're using user agent plus IP addresses as methods to track, right? But I feel like in my heart that that's not the spirit of the privacy regulations, because when users decide to opt out of data collection, that means opt out of data collection. That doesn't mean like, oh, okay, it's okay if you don't use a cookie. Go ahead and use like whatever other mechanism that you could come up with, right? So that's whenever I see other vendors saying, oh, you could do like this cookieless analytics mechanism. Yes, potentially you can do that with Adobe too, with Adobe Analytics, because again, we're such a flexible technology. But you really have to work with your legal team to decide if they will be okay with that mechanism, whatever it is.
So I guess in recent years, legal has been probably much more involved in analytics than they have formerly. So
yeah. I feel like it's a good relationship, really, to have them like as close as possible to your privacy and your legal teams, because again, like we are in the area of the experience business, right? If you cannot measure, how are you gonna differentiate from your competitors? So that like measurement, some legal teams could think like is not very priority, but it is a priority. So like as like the if you have like a strong partnership with your legal team, I think they're gonna be they're gonna start understanding how you're using the data.
I'm with you. I kind of feel like at the beginning, when it first started, like years ago, which, like 2018 is probably not years ago, but it kind of feels like it was kind of a big hubbub. And then I kind of feel like it lulled. And like, yeah, we're good. Everything's fine. And now I feel like it's kind of raised up and like really with a vengeance kind of, which is good. Like we should have rules in place and people should be able to have privacy. But yeah, I do think, and Gretchen and Luke's heard me say this before, I think like when dictionary.com comes out with a word of the year, I'm pretty sure it's going to be privacy for 2023. So
yeah, I agree. I feel that at the beginning, everybody was waiting to see what others were doing. And now that, at least in 2022, I saw a lot of enforcement.
Yeah.
Now everyone's trying to get their ducks in a row.
Exactly. And see, we're doing it here with our how to get people to be able to access and delete their data. Oh, that's awesome. No, I agree.
Yep.
Definitely a lot going on with it. So, too awesome. Oh. This has been fantastic.
Well, I think we can wrap up the meeting. So thank everyone for joining, and thank you to Maria for such a great presentation. And just as a reminder, this recording will be available later on our YouTube channel. So look to that and look forward to seeing you at our next user group meeting. So details on that will come out sometime.
Probably after Summit. Everybody now has to gear up for Summit, and then from Summit.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this presentation. And yeah, this was great. I really loved this conversation.
That's been great.
Great.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.